Hello, welcome everyone.
Hello.
Hey.
So we last talked to many people from this team in November, I believe.
Yeah, it was a while back now, wasn't it?
Yeah, wow. So, and what was fun is while we were setting up, Allison had a blue screen. And, you know, I didn't bring it up then, but I may be jinxing things because I actually wore my blue screen shirt today.
Oh my goodness.
So I don't know.
I think, Allison, you have John to blame. And only him at this
I
point.
know. Thank you, John.
Yeah, sorry about that. Well, you've got a lot of cool stuff to show us. I've got a bunch of community links, so I'm going to jump right to that. As always, I share all these links in the chats and all the stuff, so I will start by dropping the links in there. Whoop. And there we go. And let's get right to them. So, first of all, this just came out. This I saw Jen Looper just tweeted about this on Friday. This is cool if you were getting into web APIs. This is a really fun way to get started. So this is actually goes through building APIs using museum APIs. So, for instance, there's the Metropolitan API, and so just digging through like querying pieces of art and stuff. So I thought this is awesome. And we're actually looking at adding in. So this does not have .NET code yet, but we're going to be adding that in over this next month. So I just had to share it. I thought this was fun.
API for everything. Holy cow.
I know. And, what I love about this is like, there's a lot of cool APIs out there, and why not like learn, how to do API fundamentals by actually querying some fun stuff. And it's really pretty too. So. This is coming up. This is we do these. So we do a big .NET Conf in November where we announce the new stuff, and then we do these throughout the year. We do these focus events, and so this focus event coming up, we're doing a focus on. This is like desktop and migration to .NET 5 for Windows apps. So really like digging deep into what do you need to do and focusing on migrating existing current apps to .NET 5. So like WPF and Windows Forms. So this is great information here for that. Okay, cool. Damian Bowden talking about sharing ASP.NET controllers and Razor pages from a separate shared project or assembly. So this is just a nice technique, and this is common like in a business where you'll have like some common shared functionality. So he shows how to do that. So, there's some simple things just like bringing it in and injecting it. But one of the cool things he shows that you need to do is actually this thing here. So when you bring in a Razor library, you need to support pages and views. So he shows bringing that in.
Yeah, in that case, the reason why we have that, if I recall correctly, is just because we default to Blazor class libraries today, where we include like .razor files. And so when you click that checkbox, you're saying, not only do I want Blazor files to work, I also want any Razor files that I include. And honestly, this is like the bread and butter of a lot of Razor development. Like if you've ever used a framework or like some sort of vendor that's offering different components or elements, they do this effectively.
Cool. And I really love that about the ecosystem. Just as I'm watching, people are building really cool components, especially as you've seen with Blazor, this component model makes it easy for vendors and, community people to build out component libraries and stuff. So I love seeing that. This is neat. So Daniel's just building out a series. This is a whole rental car facility thing. And this post is actually the first in the series because I just saw it, but he's actually on step 5 now. So this is building out an app, and it's, pretty full featured thing, but here, like this is actually what he's building to with all the Azure components. So authentication, backend, all the backend service stuff. So, and if we go to the current one, I believe he's on part 5 now. So like, he's using an Azure Service Bus queue and stuff. So this is really nice. I love to see these kind of more full-featured things where people go really deep on something. So All right, we got a few Blazor ones. So as a reminder, we do a monthly Blazor show, and we've got the first one coming up in February. We've got Chris Sainty coming on, which is cool. So normally I don't share too many Blazor links throughout the rest of the month, but I had some cool ones I want to show here. So this one, Andrew Locke has been talking about different hosting models for Blazor WebAssembly. And here he's showing hosting without an ASP.NET Core app. And so he talked in the previous one that we featured last show on pre-rendering, and he talked about, you know, how you can do that, the different models here. And in this post, he goes through and talks in detail, because Blazor is just standard. It's just web standard stuff. It can be shared from anything, including a static application. So here he goes through and shows how to do that. And this is a pretty in-depth thing. There's all kinds of pretty diagrams and stuff. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through it in more detail than that. But as always, thanks to Andrew for these in-depth blog posts. Okay, here's an interesting one from Niels Swinberger, who I saw is on the chat. Hi, Niels. So this is a post on using YARP to work through COORS issues. So COORS, cross-origin request, I forget what S is probably written there. There is a resource sharing. So the issue you get into is security when you're requesting a resource from another domain, so another across origins, right? And so one neat thing with YARP, and we've had the YARP team on the community stand-up before to talk about what they're doing, but YARP is a very .NET friendly way of creating and configuring proxies. And so here he shows using YARP to proxy that so that you are simulating having the same origin. So, walking through here, we've got a Blazor client. We also have an API backend. So here he shows creating that backend. And then here, this is the magic, creating that YARP proxy. So then that YARP proxy, we're configuring that and pointing all the stuff together. The reverse proxy configuration is super simple, which is one of the kind of selling points here. And then you've got your JSON file for configuring your routes and stuff. So this is cool. And then one nice thing I like that Niels does here to tie it all together is using Project Ty, to run it all. And then here's showing that all working together. So really nice post, pulling a lot of the current stuff together. We've got a checklist of all the cool hip new technologies. We've got, Blazor and Ty and YARP. So well done, sir. All right, Anthony Giretti has been continuing his series on gRPC. This is a nice, quick, short tip. This is a workaround to issues you'll see where gRPC is only HTTP2. And so you can get into issues adding a service reference. If you do not support both HTTP1 and HTTP2. So here, Visual Studio 2019 only uses HTTP1 on service configuration. And so here, by supporting HTTP1 and 2, both Visual Studio and gRPC are able to play happily together. So that's cool. That's all the community links I've got. Now I've got 4 more that you, the Razor team, have shared with me. So I'm including these here, and these are in this link listing so people can get to them. First of all, we've got 2 surveys. So we've got this one I shared recently when Daniel, I think Daniel was on the show, or I don't know. It was the last stand-up maybe. But this is of course, we'll do dark mode. And this is just some kind of, how do you, which do you prefer? And now that they've run that survey for a bit, there's some more updated stuff in the survey. These are really quick surveys. Really encourage you to go through and take them. And I'm just showing, like, clicking through a few of the things is very visual. It is fun. Of course, pick dark mode because we're not, monsters. And then it's just really kind of like, which do you like? It's like an eye test. Is which is better, A or B? So there you go. These are two other things that you folks have shared with me. So this is the Language Server Protocol, or LSP, as we fondly call it. So there's that. And then a new blog post that just went out this morning from Mr. Daniel Roth. And this is cataloging some improvements in the Razor editor in Visual Studio. So
this is an experimental one, most specifically too. And like for notes, for all these links, we're probably gonna like be referencing back to them throughout like this whole thing. So we'll probably have some more context throughout as well.
Very cool. So I'll just pass over to you folks. If you want to, so this post, I'm assuming this kind of also writes up some of the stuff you'll be talking about this morning, unless you want me to kind of go through.
Oh no, yeah, it writes up basically everything. So I think that is the paper trail for what we're probably going to show today. It probably even shows a little bit more than what we're going to show today, but I think that's a good place to kind of jump to after this. So, hey, John, can you share my screen?
I will. Let me see. We have a lot of screens shared, and
there you go. Yeah, Razor tooling. Yeah. So, like, I decided to put together like a slide deck, or we all decided to put together a slide deck because there's a lot of us and there's a lot we want to show. And so it's really hard to organize all of that in a way that is reasonable. So there's gonna be lots of demos, lots of content, but in general, we're always open to questions. Totally feel free to ask lots of questions in the chat. And I saw Shanji Wright also mention, say, I hope a lot of this applies to non-Blazor code, and it totally does. This is our intent here is to make it so when Razor tooling, we're not just thinking about Blazor. Yes, Blazor is very, very cool, and it's a new thing, right? But we're trying to make all Razor experiences better, not just Blazor. So it's definitely something that's on the top of our mind. So Razor tooling. I gave this little spiel in the beginning of last time. I'm going to do it again just in case we have any new people, but I'll be kind of quick. So one of our backgrounds and like some of the background on why we're even doing a brand new Razor editor, if you haven't experienced it already, is there's lots of bugs and the pre-existing experiences. So Visual Studio today is kind of error prone in a lot of ways. We've seen lots of issues, and it turns out it's actually really, really hard to fix these issues that we're running into. The existing Razor editor is just old technology. It was created back when Razor was created years and years and years ago, and it really hasn't changed all that much. And then when new platforms kind of come into the mix, so VS Code got created like after Razor was done. VS for Mac is a thing. There's like platforms within platforms, like there's Code Spaces, there's Live Share, and we keep getting more platforms, but the bug count that we have was already unmanageable as it was. So now you're saying, okay, well, we got to fix bugs for a whole bunch of different platforms. It's a really hard problem. So our thought was, how could we fix this problem? Also, guess what? Razor actually brings in a lot of other languages. So Razor's typical format is what? HTML and C#, right? Well, in reality, there's actually a lot more languages playing there. There's the Razor syntax, like all the @ symbols, the @ keywords that you're used to. Those are going to be the Razor language. We have C#, and then we have HTML, which itself has CSS, JavaScript, and any other sub-languages it has. So in reality, we're almost working with 5 different languages at any moment, which makes our job just that much harder. It's no longer, oh, just format the document. Well, no, you got to format every little piece of the document and make sure every little piece of the document actually works together. Then there's a question from the chat. Will a new editor be a VS aftermarket offering? I guess, is this saying, will you have to pay for it? If that's the question, I don't know if I entirely get the question, but if that's the question, the answer is absolutely not. The goal here is to make it so that your existing Razor editor is better. So everything we talk about today is going to be making the existing Razor editor better and kind of the path we're taking to do that. Bugs magically disappear if you just restart VS. Yes, turn it off and turn it back on again. Definitely the solution here. And then lastly, on top of all these platforms and sub-platforms, Blazor came into existence and just like literally just made everything even more different, everything even more hard, which is a good thing because we want to have a good experience. but we already have a huge bug trail to maintain, and we have new features we want to deliver. And because we were so highly coupled to the pre-existing implementations, it was really hard to do that. So kind of like the existing solution, this is what the editor you know today for Razor and Blazor. This is kind of how it all works. You have all these different languages, and they all depend on each of the platforms that they're kind of running on, right? So can you imagine trying to make it so if you try to do VS for Mac or VS Code, you're now trying to say, I'm going to write specific code for this platform to make sure it works in a certain way. And I have to fix bugs specific to that. And not just for Razor, but for all the languages underneath it too. So it's a compounding problem, which we found to be very difficult. So of course, in this new world, if you've heard of language server specification, language server protocol rather, John linked to the language server specification earlier, and we decided to take a language server approach to this new experience. That's our new solution. And the intent here is, can there be a standard contract for a lot of the editor interactions that you do on a daily basis? Like if you have an error in your document, how does it shown? Where does it exist? What type of errors can be shown? Like, is it a warning? Is it a red squiggle? Is it not? So diagnostics is having a contract. So if we can then abide by that contract, and then the right-hand side here, all the platforms can respect that contract. Ideally, we should just have to implement the contract, and we can work across the board. Now, in practice, it doesn't actually work as seamlessly, but it removes so many of the barriers. It's just an incredibly net positive win for us. So this is kind of like what we're going to be showing, and we're saying experimental editor. It's one that's powered by LSP. It's one that works across the board, no matter the platform you're in a consistent, reasonable way. So using the new editor. So what we're going to be showing today is Visual Studio specifically. I know in the last talk, we kind of, we showed a lot of VS Code, but in this one, we're actually really happy with what we're releasing, and we'll kind of go over that in a little bit. And we're going to be doing Visual Studio specifically. So if you go to Visual Studio, you can try out the brand new editor by going Tools, and this might be hard to see, but Tools, Options, there's a Preview Features thing under Environment here, and then there's an Enable Experimental Razor Editor checkbox. Let's see if I can zoom in here. I always regret this when I do this, but I'm going to try it anyways. And this Enable Experimental Razor Editor checkbox. If you uncheck this and restart VS, you'll have the current experience. If you check it, you'll have the new experience. Now, granted, it is still experimental. I have to give that with some caveats here, right? There are some bugs. There are things we're working on improving, but there's a lot of net positives. That's something that we're constantly working towards and making better. So if you try it out and you say, you know what, it's not there for me yet, well, try it in the next release. We are iterating on this so quickly. So definitely give that a shot. All the demos you'll be seeing today are going to be with that intent, with that checkbox enabled. But moreover, when you download 16.9 Preview 3, that we may have it on by default for you. We are slowly rolling this out to customers, where people paying, non-paying, it doesn't matter. Anyone who's using Visual Studio, right? We're turning this on for you and saying, hey, what do you think? Does this work for you? And seeing how fast we can get this out into the public to make it so we can really make it quality. So with that said, the demo format a lot of today is we're going to be trying to demo on simple applications, a lot of the default apps, the default templates. So there's not a lot to consume, not a lot of different context to understand. And more importantly, we figured it'd be kind of cool. Language server protocol is a really cool thing. We think it's a cool thing. So let's take off the covers and let's look to see what's under the hood of how this all actually works. So we'll be demoing on simple apps and then doing like a little deep dive into how these things work under the covers, just from a protocol perspective. So that's kind of the intent here. And then I think the first demo, if I recall correctly, would be Tanay, if you want to take it over.
Sure thing. Thanks. Thanks, John. Okay, let's get started. So the first thing we're going to be talking today about is code actions. They're also known as light bulbs or quick actions. So before we do anything else, let's just take a quick look at what they look like. So I'm just going to swipe over to program.cs. Now, this is just a simple CS file, nothing too special about it or anything like that. I'm just going to go here and type in something like debugger.launch. So you can see error pops up pretty quickly. This error is essentially saying that debugger doesn't exist in the current context. You also see a light bulb below it with a couple of potential solutions. Let me try to zoom in here as well. I realize it's probably a bit hard to see. Okay, hopefully this is better. But you get this light bulb with some potential solutions, things like adding a using statement, fully qualifying the type, or even generating a brand new debugger class. So this provides you with a variety of solutions to the issue. I'm just going to fully qualify it right now. The diagnostic goes away, and we can return to our work. Now, what the Razor team has been working on is bringing the same great, rich experience you see right now in C# into the Razor land. So this includes both supporting these types of C# code actions, as well as brand new Razor-specific code actions. So let's take a look at that. I'm just going to head over to counter.razor. This is a fairly typical Razor file with a code block in it. If I click on the code block, I get another code action. This one allows me to extract a code block to code behind. Essentially what it does, if I click it, is it takes all the code from the code block, puts it into a counter.razor.cs file, and this helps improve modularity and just really simplifies refactoring. So that's some of the code actions we have right now. We're working on many more, but let's actually talk about how this works behind the scenes. So I'm just going to head back over to the slide, and this is a rough diagram of how everything is structured. When you start off, Visual Studio sends a request to the Razor language server. This Razor language server in turn delegates its responsibilities to Razor and C#. On the Razor side, we compute the Razor-specific code actions, things like creating a component, extracting it to code behind, that kind of stuff. Likewise, there's also a C# side, which is handled by Roslyn. Roslyn is the C# compiler and analyzer. It has a much better understanding of the C# nature of the project. So how the C# files are structured, what the different syntaxes, syntax trees, and project references, and so on are. So C# in turn is able to do that processing and provide those C# specific code actions. Thanks, thanks, Nick. The next question you may be asking is, how does this communication work? You're essentially communicating from the Razor side of things into the C# side of things. Well, as Taylor mentioned earlier, this is done using the language server protocol. Essentially, we have this object. If I can go to the next slide, we have this object called code action params. We pass in, say, a text document and a range, and C# in turn gives us some code actions. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, this is still kind of pretty abstract. And what sometimes helps is just diving deep into it and seeing how it's working under the hood. So what we're going to do is go back to Visual Studio and actually attach the Visual Studio instance that I was just showing and see what the debugger is doing in the background. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go here and type something like debugger.launch, like we did in C#. And as in C#, we're going to get a diagnostic. There it is. Now, I'm not going to click on the diagnostic quite yet. I'm just going to head over to my other Visual Studio instance and attach. There you go. And now I'm going to click on debugger. Now, as soon as I clicked on debugger, the breakpoint was triggered. And let's look at this breakpoint. This is essentially what happens when Visual Studio calls into the Razor language server. Here we see the code action params object that we were discussing earlier. Let's open this up. Just going to zoom in some more. Hopefully you can see that better. And here we see the text document. It's the counter.razor.g.cs file. Keep in mind, this is a .g.cs file. That means it's a generated C# file. When Razor communicates with Roslyn, it communicates relative to the C# because Roslyn understands the context of the document in C#. Likewise, if you look at the range, which is essentially where we clicked in the document, we see line 121. Now, the Razor document we were looking at certainly wasn't that long. Well, line 121 is the position translated from the Razor document into the C# land. So we provide Roslyn with all this information. Now, that seems pretty good. But what's happening now? let's allow Roslyn to actually do all its work, analysis, and so on, and see what it returns to us, hopefully. Let's undo it. Just going to open this up again. And, okay, zooming is tricky. Okay, so here we see some of the results. I'm just going to pop this open here, and we see Roslyn has returned to us 4 separate code actions. If you open them up, one of them is adding a using statement, another is fully qualifying system.debugger, and if we scroll down some more, we also see things like generating the debugger type. Now, you may notice when I demoed this earlier in Razor, you only saw 2 separate code actions, adding a using statement and fully qualifying the type. So clearly something more is happening. Well, if we swipe back over to the diagram, we see that once Roslyn returns us some code actions, we actually do some more post-processing. We filter out some code actions. For example, the adding a debugger type is filtered out because it's not fully supported in the Razor context, so we don't want to show it to the users. Likewise, we also do some more remapping. We want to remap from the generated C# file that Roslyn knows about to the Razor file that you're actually working in. So we do all that and send all of the results back to Visual Studio, which consolidates them and shows them to the user. So if I just detach now and swipe back over, we see the light bulb. I pop it open, and I see the 2 code actions that were filtered and remapped and provided by Roslyn.
I really wish Visual Studio's font size would actually respect that in the code actions.
Yes, like all the other stuff is pretty small. It's just the code that gets enlarged, which is really unfortunate.
Right.
But hopefully you were able to see it. Hopefully it wasn't too bad.
It's the using, and for those who can't, it's the using and fully qualify that is showing up in the little light bulb that is working there. Let's see, will this actually work? The light bulb strings, what?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. There you go.
There it is.
Great.
Oh, that's gorgeous. Yes.
Yeah. Just a bit pixelated, but other than that, pretty good.
Wow.
Now, one thing to note, by the way, is like when you're hovering over that and you're showing the light bulb. By the way, Tanay showed how there was the using system of diagnostics, what we're getting returned to. But when he said we're remapping and doing additional information, this is what he's referring to, right? We're adding the @ here because if you were just to add using system.diagnostics in the Razor file, well, that doesn't mean anything. It's not something in Razor. It's just text. So we have to understand how to actually do the right thing in this case. So some kind of intricacies of this experience.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, that's basically it for code actions in Razor. Thank you.
Wow. That was really good.
So we have a question, actually, another one. There's a few questions I'm sure I missed, but I'm just looking at the very bottom, the last one that Sean wrote. Yes. Does this mean VS could start relying more on LSP for other parts of the editor? Absolutely. There's actually a lot of movement in the VS ecosystem to kind of go towards LSP powering more and more pieces. So for instance, Roslyn has actually started moving little bits of their tech over to be LSP bound. So this is not everything. So I believe a go to definition is one of the candidates to move entirely over to LSP. And so the intention here is it's not moving the entire editor over like full scale because it's darn near impossible to do. They're not doing it. I guess I say that, yet we're doing it. So I'm a hypocrite here. But it's a hard thing to do. So in their case, they're moving a single feature over, and more things are going to be like that. So yeah, absolutely.
There was, let me see, another question here, just for background for people that don't know Roslyn as well. Can you kind of go a little deeper on that?
Sure. So Roslyn, and I guess, when we say Roslyn, it's kind of a little misleading. So we're talking about actually, could you show my screen quickly?
Yep. Just a sec. There's so many screens.
Yep.
There we go.
All right. So when I'm saying Roslyn, I am referring to, I guess the same problem here. Come on, Windows, you can do it. Is the .net/Roslyn GitHub repository. So this has basically everything you need for the C# language. So this is everything from the compiler to building your code to emit something, to analyzing it, to understand how to provide a tooling experience in Visual Studio. This is like, so when Tanay wrote the debugger, the like red squiggle, that is an error that is generated from the compiler. I believe that's from the compiler. I don't know if that's from the analyzer layer. There's different types of layers, but it's generated in this effectively code to understand that that's not correct. Something needs to happen. So it's a semantic understanding of that code. So yeah, Roslyn is here. I would suggest checking it out. They have actually a really great README for all the various details of what exists here. But when we're talking about C# and Roslyn, this is what we're referring to.
Cool.
So I believe the next piece is actually completion from Allison. Allison actually just joined the Razor tooling team from Roslyn, actually. What a great segue. Yeah, so over to Allison.
Okay, so similar to Tanay going into the details of how code actions work in the new LSP-powered Razor editor, we now want to share some of the details of how completion works. So before we begin, as Taylor mentioned, I just started getting involved in Razor pretty much this month. So most of my contacts actually comes from a Roslyn / C# background and working on the LSP experience in that space. So I just wanted to give major credits to the existing Razor team for all of their hard work in getting the completion experience in Razor to where it is today. So what exactly is completion? So many of you may already know, but just to illustrate on what exactly we're talking about here. So completion is just when you're typing and you get this list that pops up that lets you autocomplete the currently selected item in the list, just like that. So how completion works in LSP at the most basic level is that each language server, such as Razor, C#, HTML, define their own set of properties, and they let the client, such as VS or VS Code, know about them. So you can see these properties directly in the text to the right, which were screenshot directly from the LSP spec website. So some examples of these properties include trigger characters and commit characters. So basically when to automatically start a completion session and when to automatically commit a completion session. So going back to VS here, an example of, for example, a trigger character in HTML would be an open angled bracket, because as you can see, this triggers a new completion session. And if we type a bit and then say, type a closing angled bracket, we can see that the current completion session was committed. So an closing angled bracket would be an example of a commit character in HTML. So trigger characters and commit characters are needed because if you think about it, each language needs to have their own set of characters that will trigger and commit completion. So for example, in C#, if we type list, open angled bracket, you'll see that a completion list doesn't show up. And that's because while open angled bracket is a trigger character in HTML, it is not in C#. So going back to the slides here, so when a user types in the new editor, if the character they typed is a trigger character, or if the user just explicitly invokes completion, Razor will receive a completion request. So this request contains information such as where in the document completion was triggered and how it was invoked, for example, via typing or explicit invocation. What's unique about Razor especially is that since it's a mix of different languages, the request may be sent to multiple language servers. So Razor has, for example, a Razor language server and a C#/HTML language server. So the C#/HTML language server basically acts as this intermediate language server that forwards along requests to the actual C#/HTML language server owned by other teams. So for instance, a completion request may be sent to the Razor language server as well as the C# language server. So we can go through an example of this right now in the next slide. So in this example, say that we're typing the @ character at the beginning of a Razor document. So going back to VS, we can see that if we type an @ character here, we get a completion list that pops up. And this completion list is actually a mix of both Razor completions and C# completions. So for example,
Allison, can you zoom in actually with Windows Plus? It's
min plus, or what was that?
Windows Plus.
Windows Plus.
So Maybe it doesn't work.
Oh no, okay, it's not
There we go.
working.
Do Windows magnifier. Just type in magnifier rather into the Windows thing.
Oh no,
Oh, there it is.
responding super slow. Okay,
Oh, okay,
interesting.
got it. Okay.
Let me see if I can go back. Oh no.
There we go. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so wherever your cursor is, it's gonna go ahead and just zoom in on wherever your cursor is. So I'd move that magnifier out of the way just to show it so we can see this. Yes.
Okay, cool. Is that better?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, awesome. So for so back to the typing at character, you can see that popping up the completion list has a mix of both C# and HTML completion. So for example, action right here, this is a C# completion. But if we scroll further down the list, we can see code right here, which is actually from Razor. So how does this all work? Going back to the slides. So at is a trigger character in Razor files for both Razor and C#. So the initial completion request gets sent to both the Razor language server and the C#/HTML language server. So the Razor language server case is pretty straightforward. Razor computes the completions and then sends them back to the client, which is in this case, VS. In the C#/HTML case, so again, the C#/HTML case is more like this intermediate server. So it doesn't compute the completion items directly. It mainly handles some Razor-specific logic, such as mapping to the generated document. And one of the other main tasks it does is determining whether the completion location is HTML or C#. So in this case, the completion location is determined to be C#. So we ask the C# language server, which is owned by the Roslyn team, what the completions are at the map location. So C# then sends us back a list of completion items, and then we send the results back to VS. So we send these results back in the form of completion item objects, which basically contains information such as insert text, pre-select information, which is basically just like whether or not the item should be auto-committed when typing a commit character, and as well as kind, custom commit characters for the item, and so on. So the client, which is VS in this case, is responsible for combining the completion results from the various language servers. And that's pretty much the gist of it. One part I did leave out from this diagram was that along with the initial completion requests, some language servers such as C# also support completion resolve requests. So that basically means that we don't tell the client all the information in the initial request response until the user specifically selects the item in the completion list. So for example, Roslyn won't compute the tooltip information for an item unless specifically requested. And so by tooltip, I just mean over here, if we pop up the completion list, the tooltips is just this description to the right here that gives further context on the completion item. So imagine if we had to compute all the tooltips for all the items in the completion list, we might be doing a lot of unnecessary work when the user really only cares maybe about like 1 or 2 items in the list. So this lazy evaluation saves us a bunch of computation time and speeds up everything. And that's pretty much all I had.
Yeah, it's amazing how much complexity kind of falls in the completion area, where Allison just described all the various hand-holding we do to kind of even present a completion list, right? But you got to think of all the complexity that even involves picking the right items to show in completion, right? It's like, well, are certain C# elements even in scope? Are there usings added for them? Are they not? That also applies to HTML. Well, are you inside of a table? Do you show TD? Do you show TR? All sorts of different complexity that kind of just gets abstracted away. And yeah, the tooltips, oh my goodness, we actually just made a change to make our tooltips even more lazy. And oh my goodness, the amount of perf savings you get on that is pretty insane. Pretty insane.
So we did have a few questions just in general from people on how to report issues that they see. So like what's, you shared a link and I passed it over in the chat, but do you want to talk any more just about that general? Yeah.
Oh, is this the YouTube one? Did you link to the?
I did link in YouTube. I'll drop it in the general chat also. But just like, do you want to talk about how people should interact as far as if you hit issues?
Yeah,
like
so
for one question is, I know in general, I've been told to tell people to use like report an issue or report a bug from inside of Visual Studio if you hit something. Is that useful?
So actually, if you share my screen real fast, I can go over this real quickly.
Yep.
All right, I guess
There we go.
All right. Well, I can't see anything, can you? All right. So this little person in the top right corner. So I'll zoom in here. Come on, you can do it. You can do it. Actually, I have to reach onto my other screen to show this. So this little person over here, when you click this, there's a report a problem button in Visual Studio. So the second you see something, click this button, do report a problem, and I'm going to close out of this real quickly. I will then bring over what it brings up, which is this developer community feedback issue. Could say something be broke, what you actually did to make something broken. Now, I say something be broke, but honestly, it really helps if it's very clear as to what exactly happened. It helps us triage it and understand what's going wrong. And honestly, it helps us fix it quicker. So if you fill this out, it will actually attach all the information we need in a secure way to make it so that we can investigate the issue without sending all of your data to all the interwebs, right? So that's a really important piece here. So
I help with some of these for Visual Studio for Mac, so I see these, and what Taylor's pointing out is it gives us stuff like which build of Visual Studio you're running and like steps to reproduce it, and it does it like you would not believe how careful people are as far as like we cannot track any personal identifiable information. We don't track who you are or anything, but it does tell us what went wrong so that we can diagnose it. And then internally, this goes directly into the bug reports that the team uses. And I was like, I just ran to this meeting from a VS for Mac meeting where we were presenting to like the executives, and they're going through the specific bug reports. So we saw issues people reported here, and then they got fixed, and then they get like the executives are like watching, like we're all watching it, right? But everyone is paying attention to issues that you report. So this is like totally do this. Like I see people report stuff like they'll in chat or on Twitter or whatever, and it's like you can do that, but it may not. Who knows if it'll get fixed? You go and report a bug, it pops up onto people's dashboards, and it gets done. So
yeah, and I think the intent here is to make it so you don't have to do anything extra, right? Every now, like to illustrate how careful we are, like we still have to ask a lot of the times, how did you repro X, Y, and Z if we really can't tell, right? Like we don't have all the information you think, but we have so much more than if you were just to say some random bug over Twitter. This gives us at least a starting point.
Cool. So one other question here, just somebody's frustrated about this. Oops, wrong one. That's not very frustrated. Asking like, is there unit testing? Like, do you have unit tests going on? And I'm sure you do, but can you talk about like, is there automated testing going on this?
Okay, so aware of that. But there's just so many that this is referring to so many bugs.
Yeah,
So we have unit testing. We even have integration testing. But the problem is that because there's so many different languages and teams interacting, it's not necessarily as simple as say unit testing one piece, right? We can verify that we show C# completion, and then if you insert something that it inserts the code for C# completion. But what says it's correct, right? Or what if C# changes the spacing or something very subtle? How do we know? Unfortunately, it's a really hard problem to solve, and without being incredibly exhaustive in those tests, it's a very hard thing to verify that is correct. Now, we do the best that we possibly can with a pre-existing editor, and we're actually even doing a better job with a new editor. But there are things that fall through the cracks. So I did see a few mentions of like, okay, Blazor, the existing experience of VS is really painful in the chat, and we totally get it. Yes, it is absolutely hard sometimes, especially a statement where I'm saying if you do override like ABC, it replaces the code above it. Yeah, that's awful. That's the last thing we ever want to happen. And it's also one of the motivations for us doing this is so we have more control end to end over what is happening. So one, we can write the tests. Two, we can make things actually work functionally how you would expect them to work.
Cool. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I think we want people to know how to, like, if they're running into issues, how to report them and stuff.
See, and honestly, I think these are good. You should feel upset. You should feel passionate. My cat is losing his mind. Yeah, you should feel passionate, because we do too. We want this to be the absolute best experience for you as well, and we're doing everything we can to do it. You know,
Cool.
so like, totally get it. Like, I think we're on the same page, is what I'm trying to say.
Cool. Okay. Did you have more stuff to show us?
We did, yeah, and I think there's one other question about, does it work in VS Code? I think I recall.
Yeah. Let me bring
Yeah, what
that.
about VS Code? Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of the beauties with our model, is that the things we do in Visual Studio also apply in VS Code. So when we go ahead and add this, like say a new light bulb, well, you're gonna get that in VS Code too. The pieces that Tanay showed, like having those C# light bulbs, you're gonna get that there. Extract to code line, you're gonna get that in VS Code. Those are baked into the OmniSharp extension. So this is, I guess my screen is still showing here. I guess let's do a brand new window here. And please, nothing bad. Okay, that's fine. Let's test out Jason. We're okay. And extensions, this C# extension right here has all of the goods that you could possibly want. Our Razor stuff is baked into this.
Cool.
And then, yeah, so Ryan is next. So Ryan is going to show off some more good bits.
Hello. Yeah, I'm here to talk a little bit about colorization and how we go from this, your basic, completely uncolorized document that I had to lobotomize Visual Studio in order to get a picture of, to this, our latest and greatest of all colors everywhere. So basically, there are two types of colorization in Visual Studio. You have your syntactic colorization and semantic colorization. Syntactic colorization is TextMate. That's a rules-based grammar, meaning that it can identify things like, oh, we've started an HTML element, we've started an HTML attribute, but it doesn't know about things like user libraries, just general libraries. It can't know that this is a It can't know that this is a Razor component, that this is a Razor component attribute, or that this is a function. It has no way of accessing that data, but it's really fast. So it's the first thing that Visual Studio does to give you a general idea of what your document's going to look like as you go along. The other problem with it is that it's easy to get lost, especially, quote unquote, lost, especially in multi-language scenarios like ours. So you'll see here on this little example, this string, that should be blue, like with bool or void. But there's a small bug in the TextMate grammar, which has made it a different color. It's really hard to avoid that kind of things with multi-language. So what can we do about that? We can use semantic colorization. Semantic colorization has a full understanding of your project via our LSP server. That means we know that this is a component. We know that this is an attribute. We have syntax tree knowledge of the whole document. So we know what everything is for sure. But that's not quite enough for us, because Razor is such a complicated multi-language thing. We still need C# in here. You'll notice that toggle nav menu is not that bright gold like it should be. This isn't colored. This entire section isn't colored. So we need to bring C# into the fray, and that's what this looks like. This is just the Roslyn parts of our colorization here. You can see that this is that nice gold. We've got this enum colored up. And down here in the actual code block, it's all colored. And then again, we can put that all together into this, our running Visual Studio. It's nice and snappy. We get those colorizations pretty quick as we go along. Beautiful. But how does it actually work? How do we get to that? First, you start the same way you do every LSP interaction. The client makes a request against the server, the client in this case being Visual Studio. In this case, we create a syntax tree based on our entire understanding of the project and of the specific document we're looking at. We walk that tree for Razor-specific ranges. Razor-specific ranges would be things like our nav link component here, the match attribute, things like the at symbol here, that kind of stuff. But then, whoop, I keep clicking. But then we have to move, we have to get our C# information. And as not everyone, but as others have talked about, we shell out to the C# language server, which we also call Roslyn, to give us that information based on our backing document, which is just sort of a lie that we invent this document, which doesn't really exist, which represents all of the C#, and then we map that back onto the Razor document. Then we have to combine both the Razor ranges and the C# ranges into an ordered list. It's important that that's an ordered list because everything is relative when we move on to the next step and convert those ranges into semantic tokens format. What is the semantic tokens format? I'm glad you asked. How do I exit the... There we go. We go over here to the LSP specifications and we can see...
You should zoom in.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Oop.
Control scroll wheel does a pretty good job in browser. Yeah.
Control scroll wheel. Here we go. Is that better?
Yeah. More still, please. A
little more.
Whoop. Goodness. I am.
I would just do Control plus or Control scroll. That's for if you're doing the browser. That is.
That's what I was doing though.
Oh, interesting. I wonder if
you had the magnifier going and the browser scrolling, so you've got
There you go. Okay. So technical difficulties here. Here we are at the LSP specification, and
a little more.
Yeah.
Like it plus like 3 more times probably, which sounds crazy, but do it.
Yeah. So, and by the way, we always do, like, we track stats and stuff, but if you're watching on a phone or a tiny, a small device, let us know in the chat, because we do. This is actually instructive for us to keep on this. Cool. Okay, go ahead.
But there's a lot of good information here, but the part I wanted to focus on today is here, where we describe the actual tokens that we're returning. And basically what it is it's just a huge array of unsigned integers. And each of those unsigned integers, depending on its position in the array, means something. So the first part of an individual token is the delta line. That's the number of lines since either the start of the document or the previous token. And so that lets you know why it's important that we have all of this be in the correct relative position, because when we translate all of this into numbers, it's all relative to the previous stuff. Then we've got the start character relative to the start of the line or the previous character, the length of the substring we're talking about, the token type. I'm going to go into that a little bit, but that basically tells us what it is that we're colorizing. And then the modifiers. This is for stuff for like, is it static? Is it private? That kind of stuff. Currently, that doesn't work in VS. We're working on that. We'll get there. But let's go into a little bit of an example about that. Let's say we wanted to colorize this specific element, the navlink component element. So if we assume that it's all blank, empty lines above this, this is on line delta 8 from the start of the document, because everything is 0 indexed. Our start character is 1 because we're not colorizing this opening bracket in my little example here. How long is it? 7 characters. It's just string length. And now we get to the kind of interesting part, which is token type. The token type is 71, which obviously Visual Studio has no idea what 71 means by default. But what we do is when the client first starts the language server, the client in this case again being Visual Studio, we return a semantic token legend. And the legend is just a list of strings which are all in the array position that we will be returned. So the Razor tag helper elements string is in the 71st position in the array. And so Visual Studio will use that to translate this token into our nice purple color here. And then again, we do not use the modifiers yet, unfortunately, working on that. And then just the last thing I wanted to color today is, as John said at the top of the presentation, we do have some surveys that we'd love for you all to take. These are about the default theme colors. So either light mode or dark mode, depending on your preference. Basically this is just, do you like a couple of different, kind of an A/B test of colorization options? Do you like the purple that we have for our tag helper elements? Do you wish that it was lime green? That kind of stuff.
I know one person who would say yes to that.
I certainly wouldn't know anything about wanting neon colors everywhere. Yeah, that's sort of what I have today. There's a lot more interesting stuff in the LSP spec for semantic colors. If you want to dig into it, they do edits, they do range requests, but I thought I would keep it just to the basic full document request for today.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan.
Wow. Very cool. Okay, we had a question. I'm scrolling back to it now. There are so many. There's a lot of chat going on, which is amazing.
There's a few questions, I believe. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, intermediate Razor LSP unique per IDE, or is the code reusable?
It's a great question. So when Allison's example, she had mentioned that there's a Razor language server and an HTML or C# language server. So the Razor portion of that, that's like the piece that's responsible for providing like the component completions, telling you, are you in C#, are you in HTML? Some of the diagnostics that you get. That piece is reusable. It's literally verbatim just on whatever platform it is. There is no changes. The HTML C# piece, we have built effectively a contract that we implement on each platform independently, where it tries to act as dumb as possible to glue all the underlying language servers together. So it actually interacts with our Razor language server and based on this contract. And based on that, it tries doing as little as possible to make completion work in a way that can be as little code as possible, so that there's as few possibilities for breaks. So the answer is yes. Some pieces are unique, but most pieces are not.
Cool. Wow. I'm looking to see all the chat going on. I did share in the chat, by the way, the links to those surveys. Yeah.
And then I think someone asked, Sean said, there's a C# semantic colorizer that he cannot live without. Well, improvements in semantic coloring and Razor make C# semantic coloring better. So we wouldn't actually, like, technically, yes, we could change it if we absolutely wanted to. Will we? Probably not. We're going to respect whatever C# colorization options you have in Visual Studio. So if you decide to change your type names to lime green in C#, well, we're going to show it as lime green too. Yep. So that's really up to your own setting. So if your extension customizes C# colors, you'll get that in Razor as well. But we're not going to be doing that by default, unfortunately.
Cool. Yeah. So as part of doing that, like, and we did talk about, like, there's the there's all that kind of infrastructure for colorization. Is that something where people can, like, add additional extensions or get, like, more deeply colorized things if they want to?
Wait, I think are you saying, can they do that?
Yeah, I mean, like, so there's Sean talked about there's an extension that he likes for colorization. Can people customize colorization in more detail if they want to?
That's a great question. Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong. There's no way today that we can make it so your C# is different in Razor, at least colorization wise, than not. Like, we could add it and maybe do the work to add it, but it's not something out of the box that we've considered, right?
Yeah, we don't have anything which could accomplish that today. obviously you can set the individual colors in Visual Studio, but I think that's not what's being asked there. I think they want greater control of what the different token types are, and that's not something we have looked into yet.
Yep.
Cool.
Granted, if there's ever an actual large ask for these things, we have seen similar issues where people want their C# formatted differently in Razor than outside of Razor. It's another example where actually wanting a difference between in and out. If there's enough ask, like, we're willing to do anything. Just to be totally frank, like, we are at your service. you drive what makes things work, or what our priorities are.
Cool. Yeah, and people can do this by filing an issue, right? Or you could, I mean, you could. It's not ideal to do a report a problem because that shows up as a bug. It's probably better to just go into the repo and say, here's a recommendation or whatever.
Yeah, I would agree.
I always ask for extensibility kinds of questions because this came up in our last community stand-up with David Fowler and Damian Edwards, where there are often extensibility points built in that just are not super documented, right? So there's like cool little hooks that we build in case people want to customize things, but they don't know that they're available. So
yeah, yep.
Cool.
It looked like Janiscu7 was asking about nested coloring.
Yep.
By that, were you referring to Razor inside of a C# code block? If so, I did an issue which should resolve that, I think like late last week. So if that's what you mean, then that is coming.
Cool.
16.9 preview 4.
Yeah, there's one. I was going to try and look it up, but there's there's an extension in Visual Studio I've used in the past that does stuff for like it color matches braces for like nested stuff, and it does some more like colors, and it uses italics and some stuff like that. I haven't used it for a bit, but there's some pretty neat stuff people do with that sort of thing. So here's a question. Are you worried about complexity proliferation when adding so much infrastructure to support basic things like code completion and grammar parsing when it can be done natively faster?
So I guess it really, you're not wrong. Natively is absolutely faster. I think if you do native anything, it's absolutely faster. But in terms of complexity, I'd actually argue LSP is a simpler approach to doing it, especially when you incorporate all other platforms that are now being adopted with all of our various languages: VS Code, VS for Mac, Visual Studio, and then also the sub-platforms underneath them: LiveShare, CodeSpaces, and CodeSpaces is also, both of those are both on VS Code and in VS. So then having to make it work on all of those pieces, like, what does it mean to do a native completion experience in LiveShare? What does it mean to do it in CodeSpaces? The actual dev box that you're playing with is somewhere else. It's not on your box. So it's actually a difficult thing to do. I mean, then more importantly, in Razor, how do extensions work? You can make C# completion work natively, but then how do you extend that? How do you make it so maybe you want to add additional, like IntelliCode, AI-assisted auto-completion, right? Building contracts to enable anyone to extend the experiences is one of LSP's goals. And it's actually what VS Code is built on today, where they are LSP first in all of their extension models. And because of that, they have a massive extension following. And it's super successful because of that. So I think there are trade-offs. Yes, maybe it will not be as fast, but will you be as productive? I guess I'd say yes, because you can do it anywhere, but there's no doubt that native is, of course, faster than doing anything asynchronous or anything that's, say, LSP.
Cool. I found the extension just because we're chatting here. Let me share. The one that I've used in the past is VS4. But this is kind of neat. Here's the thing. So it does color matching of braces, and it's just, it's neat what people do, this rainbow braces, and there's also use of italics and stuff. So some fun stuff. I always love how people, extend things, and yeah. Cool.
Oh yeah, look at that. Oh, interesting. I see. Yeah, it's funny actually, in the new editor, that's actually one of the gaps we have today, where we don't actually even highlight the braces with the new one, but it is something that we're tracking.
Yeah, and I get this as just C#, right? Which is a much more constrained problem than you're solving with, as you explained it, it just reminds me how many languages are at play there.
Yeah.
and are kind of poorly defined, and how.
Exactly. So honestly, so that's it. So just to give I'm not going to rattle here, but the old editor was something that we called projection based. So the idea was every single one of your pieces of your document was effectively a window into another document, depending on the language that was in. So at datetime.now would have a window for the app, which would go into Razor. The datetime.now would go into C#. And if there's any HTML around it, that would be separate windows that went into HTML. Now, ideally, that sounds great because it means if you type in any one of those windows, well, you're typing in that other document somewhere else. But what happens when things magically insert lots of text? Let's take the override scenario. You're in an @code block, and you type override space, and you add one of the methods to override. This is one of the reasons why that scenario breaks down so much, is because that inserts a huge snippet of text from almost nothing. You're typing in a window. How do we know how to grow that window in a certain way, in the right way, in the formatted way, to be in the top level Razor document? It's actually a really hard problem, and it's why so many things break down. In the last community stand-up, Ajay actually showed this in formatting a little bit as to why it's so difficult to interoperate with all these different languages, and that contracts are the reason why we're any bit successful today with a new approach.
Do source generators get involved here at all?
So it's a great question. Ideally, source generators would be a great approach to take. However, they're still evolving with their capabilities, especially in terms of what even an editor model would look like for source generators. So it's still being determined. So right now, the answer is no. In the future, I absolutely envision them having some sort of play, though.
Cool. Well, I guess we're kind of at the end of the time. And we did also, for people that want to read more, we shared a lot of links, including there's that blog post that just went out this morning. So that digs into that. And then I guess some of the top takeaways, there's read the blog post, take the surveys. And then if you hit an issue, file it using Visual Studio, report a problem. And use the new, try the new experimental LSP-based Razor syntax highlighter thing.
So the current release that everyone has access to is 16.9 Preview 3. If you're in the preview builds of Visual Studio, this is going to have a lot of your really good goodies. Every single release is going to have more, though. So we're going to, via 16.9 Preview 4 is going to have even more bug fixes and goodies. Preview 5 will probably only have bug fixes if we see fit, but we'll probably start putting work towards 16.10 Preview 1. So if you try it out, see things that aren't working, please file issues. We love the feedback. It's what we operate on. It's how we know what is the most important tasks to tackle. So without issues, we literally can't do anything. So please file issues. Use the report a problem tool in Visual Studio. That's the best way to do it.
Okay.
And,
I did see one question pop up, which I think is so interesting. It's worth taking here, which is how do you like? Yeah, and this just goes more into also how do you actually prioritize and think about features, because this is a hard. Yeah, how do you quantify this?
So in Razor's case, it's actually super easy. Meaning we are a whole bunch of different languages. Are people using said features in the languages that we wrap? So let's take light bulbs, right? They are probably one of the most, like aside from completion, one of the most C# features used. So there is no question they are incredibly effective because of their sheer usage in Visual Studio. So would they work in Razor? It's C#. Absolutely. Do you scratch your head after seeing an error in Razor files today and not have a light bulb to do it? Yes, you scratch your head. You don't know what namespace you do. Honestly, a lot of the time we see people, they go to a C# file, type the same exact piece of code out, get the light bulb, and then just copy and paste it in the Razor file. And so a lot of these interactions are just proven via telemetry that we have to understand that, okay, well, in these other languages, these have proven to be successful. We can bring them into the Razor world.
Awesome. Okay. I'm just pasting the links into the chat again. So that includes the surveys and blog posts and everything. I think this is a great place to wrap up. And then we'll do regular check-ins with the team here because you folks are just cranking stuff out. So
yeah, one other thing that I would like, if you could share my screen, just very, very last piece.
Yep. There we go.
Okay. So for trying out reporting issues, go ahead and, as we said before, use the report a problem tool. This is our GitHub handles, GitHub Twitter handles. If you want to reach out, we're always down to hear feedback. Let us know. All the code for this is actually happening in the ASP.NET Core tooling repo. Let's see if I can zoom in here. GitHub.com/.net/ASP.NET Core-tooling. This is where all the code for today is going on. We would love contributions if people are interested. I remember last time someone had mentioned, what about a light bulb for extracting CSS to a CSS code behind? And I would love to have something like that, right? There's so many opportunities here, or at least just even conversations that I'd love to have. And just know the new editor there's so many feature wins that we have, but it's not, it's lacking in parity in some ways with the old editor, but it's also surpassing it in others. So I think really, if you're finding a lot of issues with the previous one, try the new one out and it might solve every one of your issues. If you try the new one out and it doesn't, well, just keep giving it a shot every single release and give us a chance. We are just trying to make this the absolute best experience possible. And again, we are taking feedback to drive how quickly we fix different things.
One thing that I love too about this is it's not like you need to install a whole new Visual Studio or whatever. You can turn on or off the checkbox, and I think you restart Visual Studio.
That's it. Yeah, it was literally tools, options, preview features. You check the checkbox, you close Visual Studio, and you open it back up, and then you're done. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
Yep, that's it.
So yeah.
And it's even possible to run both VS and VS Preview side by side. So if you want to try the two different experiences and not ensure your current experience still works as normal, you can do that. So that really empowers you to try the new editor, see if it's to your taste, and get going.
Yeah, it's a really great point.
And Squirrel Physics gives you a solid vote here to do exactly. And I love the name anyways. But,
I do too.
Yeah.
It's so true. And like, if you see yourself crashing a lot, the new editor is going to be a saving grace. We have made so many improvements, and architecturally, it's almost impossible to crash Visual Studio with the new editor because of the choices we've made. So if you crashed it, like, kudos to you. Please file it. I would love to see it to understand what we've possibly missed. Now, famous last words, right? I'm going to eat that. Like, I'm sure the next time we do it, I'm going to regret
challenge.
Yeah, I'm going to regret saying that so hard. But yeah, hold my beer.
Yeah, we're out for you now. Awesome.
Right.
Okay, well, this is a great place to wrap up. Thanks to the whole team. It's amazing to. I thought it was really cool. We have a lot of teams come on, and today was amazing to see everyone give such great presentations. So that was really cool. Thanks and welcome, Allison. It was great to have you on. And so cool.
Yeah, one thing I would say, let us know if the deep dive format is interesting. Like, I know this is a different forum to actually show this stuff off, but we figured deep diving into some of these features was a cool thing to do. Maybe in the future we could do more, but if it's not your thing, maybe we don't. Maybe we just show features off and talk about them. So let us know if that's something you're interested in, if this was successful, if this wasn't.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll wrap up there. Thanks a bunch, everybody.
Thank y'all.
We go to the thanks for watching screen now.